They say love is blind, but greed is just plain stupid. You are about to hear the story of Alexander Sterling, a man who thought he had it all, the millions, the power and the audacity. He didn't just cheat on his wife. He drove his mistress right up the driveway of their marital estate in a brand new Porsche, expecting his wife, Victoria, to quietly pack her bags and leave. He thought he held all the cards. He thought he owned the mansion. But Alexander forgot a tiny lethal detail, a detail hidden in a dusty legal archive from 15 years ago. He forgot whose name was actually on the deed. Buckle up, because the revenge you're about to witness is colder than ice and sweeter than victory. The gravel crunched under the tires of the Miami blue Porsche 911 GT3, a sound that usually signaled Alexander was home early from the firm. But from the second-floor balcony of the master suite, Victoria Sterling knew something was wrong. Alexander never came home at 2:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. He was a man of rigid schedules, a creature of corporate habit, who treated time like a commodity he couldn't afford to waste. Victoria tightened the silk belt of her dressing gown. She wasn't dressed for company. She had spent the morning reviewing the charitable trust documents for the Sterling Foundation, a headache of paperwork that Alexander usually insisted he handled, though Victoria did the actual reading. She watched as the car door opened. Alexander stepped out, looking every bit the tech mogul he was, custom navy suit, sunglasses that cost more than most people's rent, and that arrogant jawline that had once charmed her, but now just looked sharp enough to cut glass. But he didn't walk to the front door. He walked to the passenger side. Victoria's breath hitched in her throat. She watched him open the door with a flourish, a smile plastered on his face that she hadn't seen directed at her in 5 years. Out stepped a woman. She was young, perhaps 24, with hair the color of spun gold, and a dress that was far too short for a Tuesday afternoon in Connecticut. Victoria didn't scream. She didn't cry. She felt a strange, cold sensation wash over her, like she had just swallowed an ice cube whole. She stepped back from the window, smoothed her hair, and walked downstairs. By the time she reached the grand foyer, the front door was swinging open. Alexander didn't even use his key. He just barged in, his laughter echoing off the marble floors. "And this," Alexander's voice boomed, "is the Great Hall. Italian marble imported. I had it flown in 3 years ago. It's huge." The girl cooed, her voice high and breathy. She was clinging to his arm like a designer accessory. Victoria stood at the base of the staircase, her hand resting lightly on the banister. "Alexander." The laughter stopped abruptly. Alexander looked up, his expression shifting from pride to annoyance, as if he had found a stain on his favorite shirt. "Victoria," he said, his tone flat. "I didn't think you'd be here. I thought Tuesday was your spa day." "It's Wednesday, Alexander," she said calmly. Her eyes shifted to the girl. "And who is this?" Alexander straightened his jacket. He didn't look guilty. That was the thing about Alexander. He had moved past guilt years ago. He looked empowered. "This is Brittany," Alexander said, stepping forward, pulling the girl with him. "Brittany, this is Victoria, my current wife." Current. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Brittany offered a small, awkward wave. She popped a piece of gum. "Hi. Nice place you got here. Alex says I can redecorate the sunroom." Victoria descended the last few steps, her heels clicking rhythmically on the stone. She stopped 3 feet from them. She could smell Brittany's perfume, something floral and cheap, trying too hard to smell expensive, masked by the scent of Alexander's Tom Ford cologne. "Redecorate?" Victoria asked, arching an eyebrow. "Victoria, we need to talk," Alexander said, his voice dropping an octave assuming the command tone he used in boardrooms. "Brittany is going to be staying here for a while." "Is she?" Victoria asked. "In the guest wing, I suppose the staff can make up a room, though Mrs. Higgins hates short notice." "No," Alexander said, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Not the guest wing. She'll be staying in the master suite. With me." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Brittany looked slightly uncomfortable, shifting her weight from one stiletto to the other. "I see," Victoria said. She didn't blink. "And where exactly do you propose I stay?" "The pool house is comfortable," Alexander said, waving a hand dismissively. "It's fully furnished. It has a kitchenette. It's perfect for you. Look, Victoria, let's not make this difficult. We both knew this marriage was a corpse walking for years. I've just finally decided to bury it. My lawyers are drafting the papers as we speak, but until everything is finalized, Brittany lives here. This is my house, after all." Victoria looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the grey hairs he'd dyed brown. She saw the stress lines around his eyes from the lawsuits he tried to hide from her. She saw a man who thought power was something you took, not something you earned. "Your house," Victoria repeated softly. "My house," he emphasized. "I paid for the renovations. I pay the mortgage. I pay the staff. So be a good girl, pack your things, and head to the pool house. We can discuss the settlement numbers in the morning. I'm thinking generous. Maybe enough for a condo in Florida." He turned his back on her, guiding Brittany toward the living room. "Come on, babe, let me show you the wine cellar. I have a 1982 Bordeaux you're going to die for." Victoria watched them walk away. She stood alone in the foyer of the home she had found, the home she had restored, the home she had loved. She reached into the pocket of her dressing gown and pulled out her phone. She didn't call her mother. She didn't call a friend. She dialed a number she had memorized 10 years ago. "Hayden Toe," she said, when the line connected. "It's happening. He's triggered the clause." On the other end of the line, Hayden Ford, no, not the actor, but the most shark-like estate attorney in the tri-state area, chuckled darkly. "I'll have the file on your desk in an hour, Mrs. Sterling. Shall I bring the eviction notice, or do you want to savor this?" "Bring everything," Victoria whispered, her eyes hardening. He moved her into the master bedroom. "Oh," Hayden said, his voice dropping. "That was a mistake. I'll see you at 6 o'clock." By 6 o'clock, the atmosphere in the Sterling mansion was toxic enough to kill small plants. Alexander had ordered a catering team to prepare a welcome dinner, ostensibly for Brittany, but Victoria knew it was a power move. He wanted to flaunt his new life in her face, in her dining room at her table. Victoria had spent the afternoon not packing, but dressing. She chose a black dress, Armani vintage, severe. It was a dress you wore to a funeral or to an execution. When she walked into the dining room, Alexander and Brittany were already seated. Brittany was wearing a napkin tucked into her shirt collar like a bib. Alexander was pouring wine, his face flushed with the arrogance of a man who believes he has won. "You're still here?" Alexander asked, looking up, as Victoria took her usual seat at the head of the table. "I thought I told you to go to the pool house. This is a private dinner." "It's my dining table, Alexander," Victoria said smoothly, unfolding her napkin. "And Mrs. Higgins made her roast duck. I never miss the roast duck." Brittany looked at Alexander. "Babe, you said she was leaving." "She is leaving." Alexander snapped, glaring at Victoria. "She's just being difficult. It's her way of coping. Denial is a powerful drug." Victoria poured herself a glass of water. "So, Brittany," she said, her voice conversational. "How did you two meet? Was it a networking event? A charity gala?" Brittany giggled, seemingly oblivious to the tension. "Oh no. I was the bottle service girl at Velocity. You know the club downtown. Alex bought 3 bottles of Grey Goose and tipped me $2,000. It was so romantic. $2,000, Victoria mused. That's generous. Alexander usually tips 15%. Times must be good at the firm. Alexander slammed his wine glass down. Enough! Victoria, get out! Now! No, she said. Excuse me. I said no. Victoria took a sip of water. I'm not going to the pool house. I'm not leaving the master suite. And I'm certainly not moving to a condo in Florida. Alexander laughed, a harsh, barking sound. You think you have a choice? I spoke to my lawyers. The prenup gives you a payout, sure, but the real estate assets acquired during the marriage, well, it's complicated. But since I'm the primary earner, and the mortgage is paid from my accounts, I keep the house. That's how the world works, honey. He who has the gold makes the rules. Is that so? Victoria asked. I built this life. Alexander shouted, his face turning red. I built this house. Do you know how much the East Wing renovation cost? $4 million. I paid for every brick. You paid for the bricks, Victoria corrected gently. But you didn't pay for the land. Alexander paused. What are you talking about? It's 5 acres in Greenwich. Of course I paid for the land. No, Victoria said. You didn't? Just then the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, authoritative ring. Who is that? Alexander demanded. If it's one of your crying friends. It's not a friend, Victoria said, standing up. It's Hayden. Alexander rolled his eyes. Your family lawyer, that old fossil. What's he going to do? Lecture me on morality. Victoria walked to the dining room doors. She turned back, looking at Brittany, then at Alexander. Actually, he's not here to lecture you. He's here to evict you. She opened the doors and Hayden walked in. He was a man of 60, silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than Alexander's car. He carried a thick leather briefcase. He didn't look at Alexander. He looked at the room, nodded approvingly, and set the briefcase on the sideboard. Good evening, Mr. Sterling. Hayden said, his voice like gravel. Ms. Brittany, was it? What the hell is this? Alexander stood up, knocking his chair over. Get out of my house. Hayden opened the briefcase and pulled out a single yellow document encased in a protective plastic sleeve. He slid it across the long mahogany table. It stopped perfectly in front of Alexander. Mr. Sterling, Hayden said, you seem to be laboring under a significant misapprehension regarding the ownership of Blackwood Estate. You see, when you and Victoria married, you were, as I recall, cash poor, but asset rich in potential only. I made millions, Alexander spat. Later, Hayden corrected. You made millions later. But 15 years ago, when you wanted to buy this fixer-upper to impress your investors, you didn't have the credit score to secure the loan for the land. Do you remember who did? Alexander looked down at the document. It was a deed of trust. Victoria's grandmother, Hayden said. Eleanor Blackwood. She bought the land. Cash. And she placed it into a generational dynasty trust. So what? Alexander said, sweat starting to form on his brow. I built the house on top of it. The improvements belong to me. Ah, Victoria said, stepping back to the table. Clause 4, Section B. Read it, Alexander. Alexander squinted at the old paper. In the event of any permanent structure being erected upon the trust land, said structure immediately becomes the property of the trust, regardless of the financier of said materials, unless a separate ground lease is signed by the trustee. Alexander looked up, his face, pale. I never signed a ground lease. No, Victoria said, a small, dangerous smile appearing. You were too busy trying to impress your board of directors to read the fine print. You thought because you paid the contractors you owned the walls. But you don't. You don't own the walls, the roof, or the floor you're standing on. You are effectively a squatter. And the trustee, Alexander whispered. Who is the trustee? Hayden pointed a manicured finger at Victoria. The sole trustee and beneficiary is Victoria Sterling. Brittany looked between them, confused. Wait, so, does he have money or not? Victoria looked at the mistress. He has money, dear, but he doesn't have a home. And as of... She checked her Cartier watch. 5 minutes ago, he is trespassing. Alexander grabbed the paper, his hands shaking. This won't hold up in court. I have rights. I've lived here for 15 years. Squatters' rights. Adverse possession. Adverse possession requires the occupation to be hostile. Hayden droned as if reading a textbook. You were living here with Victoria's permission. That permission has just been revoked. Written notice was filed with the county clerk this afternoon. Hayden reached into his briefcase again. He pulled out a red envelope. This is a notice to quit, Hayden said. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. If you are not gone by 6 o'clock p.m. tomorrow, the sheriff will be called to remove you. And Alexander, the trust has strict clauses regarding moral turpitude and damage to the property. He looked at Brittany. Bringing a mistress into the master suite that constitutes a violation of the moral sanctity clause of the trust. We can sue you for emotional damages to the estate's beneficiary. And we will win. Alexander looked at Victoria. For the first time in his life, he looked small. Victoria, he stammered, you can't do this. Where am I supposed to go? Victoria picked up the bottle of 1982 Bordeaux Alexander had opened. She poured herself a glass. I hear the Motel 6 on the interstate has vacancies, she said, taking a sip. But check the reviews first. I hear they have bed bugs. Alexander Sterling did not go to the Motel 6. His pride was a fortress that, while currently under siege, had not yet crumbled completely. Instead, he checked himself and Brittany into the presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton in downtown White Plains. It cost $3,500 a night money he put on a corporate American Express card that he knew was dangerously close to its limit. The morning after the confrontation, the reality of his situation began to set in, bringing with it a nausea that had nothing to do with the previous night's wine. Brittany was still asleep, sprawled across the king-sized bed, scrolling through Instagram with one eye open. "Babe," she mumbled, as Alexander knotted his tie in the mirror. Room service said they're out of the gluten-free waffles. Can you believe that this place is a dump? Alexander didn't answer. He was staring at his reflection. He looked tired. The grey roots were showing. He grabbed his briefcase and stormed out without a goodbye. He arrived at the offices of Katz and O'Malley, his personal legal counsel, at 8 a.m. sharp. Daniel Katz, a man who had cleaned up Alexander's messes for 2 decades, looked surprisingly unkempt. His desk was covered in files. "You didn't tell me," Daniel said, not bothering with a greeting. He held up a copy of the deed of trust Hayden had served the night before. "I didn't know," Alexander shouted, pacing the small office. She never mentioned it. For 15 years, she played the dutiful housewife. She let me renovate. She let me landscape. She let me build the damn pool house. How could she own the land? Because her grandmother was Eleanor Blackwood, Daniel said, rubbing his temples. I did some digging overnight. That trust is ironclad. It's old money, Alex. That's the worst kind. It doesn't scream. It whispers and waits. You have no claim to the property. None. I spent $4 million on renovations. Donation, Daniel said bluntly. Legally, you donated those improvements to the trust. It's gone. Alexander sank into a leather chair. It can't be gone. You don't understand, Daniel. I need that house. Nobody needs a 10-bedroom mansion, Alex. You have the penthouse in Manhattan, don't you? Just go there. Alexander went silent. The air conditioning hummed in the background. Alex, Daniel asked, his voice dropping. You have the penthouse, right? I sold it, Alexander whispered. Last year, to cover the margin call on the crypto investment. Daniel stared at him. Okay, so you have the portfolio, the stocks. Leveraged, Alexander said, staring at the floor. I leveraged everything to buy into that AI startup in Silicon Valley. It hasn't paid out yet. I'm cash poor, Daniel. I'm floating on credit lines and appearances. Daniel leaned back, looking horrified. So let me get this straight. You cheated on your wife, brought the mistress to the marital home, and tried to kick the wife out, while being completely insolvent. I thought I could force a settlement, Alexander snapped. I thought if I bullied her she'd leave, and I could sell the house quietly. I figured the house was worth $12 million. I could pay off the debts, keep the startup shares, and restart with Brittany. You can't sell what you don't own, Daniel said. But it gets worse, doesn't it? I know that look on your face. Alexander loosened his tie. He looked like a man standing on the gallows. 3 years ago, Alexander began, his voice shaking. When the firm hit that rough patch, I needed liquidity. Fast. I took out a second mortgage on the estate, a private equity loan, $5 million. Daniel's face went pale. You can't take a mortgage on a property you don't own. I acted as if I owned it, Alexander said. The bank asked for spousal consent because her name was loosely associated with the address in the public records. And I signed it. The room went deathly silent. You signed Victoria's name. Daniel asked, his voice a whisper. I forged it, Alexander admitted. I have a guy. He notarized it. It looked perfect. I thought I'd pay it back before she ever knew. But the interest rates spiked, and the startup hasn't IPO'd yet. Daniel Katz stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the city below. Alex, get out. What? Get out of my office. You didn't just lose your house. You committed bank fraud, wire fraud, and forgery. If Victoria asserts her title, the bank will realize their lien is invalid because the owner never signed for it. They will investigate. They will find the forgery. You are going to prison. You're my lawyer. Fix it. I'm a corporate attorney, not a magician, Daniel yelled, turning around. There is no fixing this unless... Unless what? Alexander begged. Unless you can convince Victoria to ratify the loan. Daniel said, his eyes cold. If she signs a document saying she authorized you to sign for her back, then you're safe from jail. You'll still lose the house, but you won't wear orange. But considering you just moved your mistress into her bedroom, good luck with that. Alexander grabbed his briefcase. He had 12 hours left on the eviction notice. He had to get to Victoria. He had to beg, lie, or threaten. He had to get that signature. Back at the mansion, Victoria was not sitting idly. She was in the library surrounded by 3 people, Hayden, a forensic accountant named Stella, and the chief of police, Chief Miller, who happened to be an old friend of her father's. The eviction notice expires at 6:00 p.m., Hayden said, checking his pocket watch. But we have a more pressing issue. Stella the accountant slid a tablet across the desk. Victoria, in reviewing the household accounts to separate the assets, I found a discrepancy. There's a recurring payment of $35,000 a month to a shell company in the Caymans. It's labeled consulting fees in Alexander's ledger, but it's actually servicing a debt. What kind of debt? Victoria asked. A loan, Stella said. secured against this address. The lender is a shadow bank called Apex Capital." Victoria frowned. "He couldn't have secured a loan against the house. He doesn't have the deed. And I never signed anything?" Hayden cleared his throat. "That's what I feared. Victoria, he likely forged your signature. It's the only way the paperwork would clear the underwriters." Victoria sat back in the heavy oak chair. The betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore. It was financial, criminal. It was total. She felt a flash of anger, so hot it almost made her dizzy, but she forced it down, compressing it into cold resolve. "If he forged my signature," Victoria said slowly, "and I expose it, he goes to federal prison." Chief Miller finished taking a sip of coffee. "For a long time, it's grand larceny and fraud." "He'll be coming back," Victoria said, realizing the pattern. "He's smart enough to know that if I reclaim the title publicly, the bank invalidates his loan. He's exposed. He's not coming back for his clothes, Hayden. He's coming back to cover his tracks." "We'll have a patrol car at the gate," Chief Miller said. "No," Victoria said, standing up. She walked to the window where she had first seen Brittany get out of the car. "Let him in. Tell the guards to open the gates." "Victoria, that's dangerous," Hayden warned. "I need him to admit it," Victoria said. "I need him to say it to my face. I want to know exactly how little I meant to him. Besides," she turned to the bookshelf where a small hidden camera was blinking almost imperceptibly inside the spine of a fake encyclopedia. "I want it on tape for the divorce proceedings." At 4:45 p.m., the Porsche roared up the driveway. Alexander was alone. He had left Brittany at the Ritz with a maxed-out credit card and a vague promise of jewelry. He burst through the front door looking frantic. His suit was rumpled, his eyes wild. He found Victoria in the sunroom, calmly pruning a bonsai tree. "Victoria!" he shouted, marching in. "You have 1 hour and 15 minutes, Alexander," she said, without looking up. "I hope you brought boxes." "Stop it," he panted, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We need to talk, alone." "We are alone." Alexander approached her, stopping just short of grabbing her arm. He took a deep breath, trying to compose himself, trying to summon the charm that had won her over 15 years ago. "Vic." He used the nickname he hadn't used in a decade. "Look, I know I messed up. Bringing Brittany here. It was a midlife crisis. It was stupid. I see that now. A midlife crisis is buying a motorcycle, Alexander. Moving a 20-year-old into my bedroom is an act of war. I know, I'm sorry. I'll send her away. I'll break it off. But we need to handle this house situation. It's going to hurt both of us if we don't fix it." Victoria snipped a branch. "It won't hurt me. I own it. Listen to me." He snapped his facade, cracking. "There are things you don't know. Business things, complicated things." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a document. It was a single page, densely typed. "I need you to sign this," he said, thrusting it at her. "It's a retroactive authorization. It just says that you were aware of my business dealings regarding the estate's equity. It's a formality to keep the IRS off our backs." Victoria took the paper. She read it. It was exactly what Hayden had predicted, a ratification of unauthorized acts. If she signed this, she was accepting liability for the $5 million loan. She would be on the hook for his debt. She looked up at him. "You want me to sign this?" "Yes," Alexander said, his eyes desperate. "Just sign it, and I'll give you whatever you want in the divorce. I won't contest anything. Just sign the paper, Victoria." "Why?" she asked innocently. "What happens if I don't?" "If you don't," Alexander's voice trembled, "the IRS, They'll freeze everything. The assets, the accounts. You'll be penniless too. I'm doing this to protect you." "You're lying," she said softly. "I am not lying," he screamed, slamming his hand on the table. The bonsai tree shook. "You forged my signature, Alexander," she said. The statement hung in the air like smoke. Alexander froze. "I know about Apex Capital." She continued, her voice gaining strength. "I know about the $5 million. I know you used my grandmother's legacy to fund your gambling on the stock market." Alexander's face twisted. The charm evaporated, replaced by pure, unfiltered malice. "You think you're so smart. You were nothing when I met you. Just a lonely heiress with a big house and no life. I gave you a life, I gave you status." "You gave me a headache," Victoria retorted. "And now you want me to save you from prison. You will sign that paper." Alexander threatened, stepping closer. "Or I will burn this house to the ground. I swear to God, Victoria, if I go down, I am taking this whole estate with me." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." He lunged for her, grabbing her wrist, trying to force the pen into her hand. "Sign it. Get your hands off her." The voice boomed from the doorway. Alexander spun around to see Chief Miller standing there, 2 uniformed officers behind him. Hayden stepped out from behind the heavy velvet curtains of the adjacent room. Alexander dropped Victoria's hand. He looked at the police, then at the document on the floor, then at Victoria. "You set me up," he whispered. "You set yourself up, Alexander," Victoria said, rubbing her wrist. 15 years ago, when you decided you were smarter than everyone else." Chief Miller stepped forward, handcuffs clinking at his belt. "Alexander Sterling, you are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and domestic assault. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." Alexander backed away, bumping into the glass table. "No. No, you can't. I'm Alexander Sterling. Do you know who I am?" "Yeah," Chief Miller said, snapping the cuffs on. "You're the guy who trespasses on the Blackwood estate." As they dragged him out, Alexander screamed back at her. "Brittany won't leave. She knows things you haven't won yet. Victoria, you haven't won." Victoria watched the police car lights flash, red and blue, against the manicured hedges. The house was quiet again. Hayden walked up beside her. "Well, that was dramatic. He mentioned Brittany." Victoria said, her brow furrowing. "He said she knows things, and that she won't leave. She's at the Ritz, isn't she?" "For now," Victoria said. "But Alexander is a narcissist. He doesn't keep secrets. He keeps leverage. If Brittany knows something, it's something he planned to use against me." Victoria picked up the ratification document from the floor and tore it in half. "Hayden," she said, "get the car. We're going to the Ritz-Carlton. I think it's time I had a girl-to-girl chat with the Mistress." The lobby of the Ritz-Carlton was a study in hushed opulence, a stark contrast to the chaotic scene Victoria had just left at the mansion. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over velvet armchairs where businessmen whispered over scotch. Victoria walked through the revolving doors, Hayden trailing a step behind her like a silent bodyguard. She didn't ask the concierge for the room number. She didn't need to. She simply texted Alexander's phone, which she knew the police had confiscated, and checked the shared cloud account she still had access to. The "Find My Device" feature for his iPad, which Brittany had been clutching earlier, pinged from the penthouse suite on the 42nd floor. "Wait here," Victoria told Hayden near the elevators. "If I'm not down in 20 minutes, send security." Victoria, she could be volatile, Hayden warned, shifting his briefcase. "She's a 24-year-old girl who just found out her sugar daddy is bankrupt," Victoria said, adjusting her gloves. "She's not volatile. She's terrified." Victoria took the elevator up. The doors slid open to a private hallway. She could hear the sobbing before she even knocked. It wasn't the polite crying of someone who lost a contest. It was the raw, panicked wailing of someone who had just realized the floor was made of trapdoors. Victoria knocked firmly. "Go away!" Brittany's voice came through the heavy oak door. "Room service is cut off, I get it." "It's Victoria Sterling," she announced calmly. "Open the door, Brittany, or I'll have the hotel management open it, and I imagine they'll be less polite about the bill Alexander didn't pay." A moment of silence, then the sound of a chain sliding. The door opened a crack. Brittany stood there, mascara running down her cheeks, wearing a fluffy hotel robe that looked 3 sizes too big. She looked younger now, stripped of the arrogance and the expensive dress. "What do you want?" Brittany sniffled. "Did you come to gloat?" "I came to offer you a lifeboat," Victoria said, pushing the door open gently but firmly and stepping inside. The suite was a disaster. Clothes were strewn everywhere. Shopping bags from Gucci Prada and Saint Laurent were overturned on the floor. It looked like a frantic attempt to pack that had turned into a breakdown. "He's in jail, isn't he?" Brittany asked, collapsing onto the edge of the unmade bed. "I saw the news alerts on his iPad. Fraud. Forgery." "He is," Victoria confirmed, standing in the center of the room. She refused to sit. "And since his assets are frozen, that means this room isn't paid for. Neither are those clothes, presumably. The hotel security will be up here within the hour to escort you out. And since the credit card on file is Alexander's, and it's now evidence in a federal investigation, they might hold you for theft of services." Brittany's eyes went wide. "Theft, I didn't steal anything. He gave me the card." "Try explaining that to the police when they're already processing him for grand larceny," Victoria said coldly. "You're an accessory, Brittany. You're the beneficiary of stolen funds. The prosecutor will eat you alive just to get to Alexander." Brittany burst into fresh tears. "I didn't know he told me he was rich. He told me he invented some A&R algorithm. I wanted to get out of debt. I have student loans. My mum is sick." Victoria watched her. It was pathetic, but there was a ring of truth to it. Alexander preyed on vulnerability. He liked to be the savior because it made it easier to be the master. "I can help you," Victoria said. Brittany looked up. "Why would you help me? I slept with your husband. I tried to kick you out of your house." "Because I don't care about you, Brittany. You're irrelevant to me. But you have something I need." "I don't have anything," Brittany wept. "Just these clothes." "Alexander said you knew things," Victoria said, stepping closer. "He said you had leverage. What did he mean?" Brittany bit her lip, looking away. He made me keep a bag. He said if I ever opened it, he'd kill me. He said it was his insurance policy." "Where is it?" Brittany pointed to the room safe in the closet. "The code is his birthday. 0812. Victoria walked to the closet, punched in the code, and the safe beeped open. Inside sat a heavy silver hard drive and a stack of file folders. Victoria took them out and sat at the desk, flipping open the first folder. Her blood ran cold. It wasn't just financial records. It was a blueprint. There were emails, fake emails drafted under Victoria's name. There were transfer requests from the Sterling Charitable Foundation to offshore accounts authorized with a digital signature that looked exactly like hers. "He wasn't just stealing," Victoria whispered, realizing the horror of the long con. "He was setting me up." The plan was detailed in Alexander's handwriting in the margins. He had been siphoning money from his investors, but routing it through the charity Victoria managed. If the SEO or the FBI ever came looking, the trail would lead straight to Victoria. She would be the embezzler. He would be the clueless husband, devastated by his wife's greed. He had planned to divorce her, send her to prison, and keep the house and the hidden millions. Brittany was watching her. "Is it bad?" "It's catastrophic," Victoria said, closing the folder. She looked at the girl. "If the police find this, they might think I wrote these. Alexander could flip the script and say I'm the mastermind." "He told me," Brittany hesitated. "He told me that if anything happened to him, I was supposed to mail that drive to the district attorney. He said it would clear his name." Victoria felt a chill. Alexander had weaponized his mistress. If he got arrested, Brittany was the trigger to frame Victoria. "Brittany," Victoria said, her voice steady. "You are at a crossroads. You can do what he said and become the accomplice to a man who will throw you under the bus the moment it serves him. Or you can give this to me." "What do I get?" Brittany asked, a spark of survival instinct returning. Victoria pulled a checkbook from her purse. "I will write you a personal check for $50,000. It's enough to pay your student loans, help your mother, and get you a plane ticket to anywhere that isn't here. But you leave tonight, and you never mention the name Sterling again." Brittany looked at the checkbook, then at the hard drive. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and walked to the door. "Take it," she said. "He's a monster. He made me practice your signature, you know, for fun. I didn't know what it was for." Victoria froze. "You forged the documents." "I didn't know," Brittany cried. "He just said, 'Write Victoria Sterling,' over and over. He said it was a game." Victoria signed the check and ripped it out. She handed it to Brittany. "Go," Victoria said. "Before I change my mind." Brittany grabbed the check and ran. Victoria stood alone in the hotel room, holding the evidence of her own framing. She had the hard drive, but the danger wasn't over. Alexander was in jail, but the seeds he had planted were already in the system. She needed to kill the weeds before they choked her. The Westchester County Correctional Facility was a far cry from the country club, but Alexander Sterling was adapting. He was a narcissist, and narcissists thrive on manipulation, regardless of the venue. He sat in the visitation booth, separated by thick glass from his new attorney. Daniel Katz had fired him as a client the moment the handcuffs went on, citing a conflict of interest, and frankly, a desire to not be disbarred. In his place sat Magnus Thorne. Thorne was known in legal circles as the Hydra. He was expensive, unethical, and incredibly effective at dirty litigation. He wore a suit that was too shiny and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "So," Thorne said, leaning into the microphone, "the wife has the house, the cops have the forgery evidence, and your assets are frozen. It's a bleak Tuesday, Alex." "It's temporary," Alexander said, his voice calm. He looked surprisingly put together in his orange jumpsuit. "Victoria thinks she's won because she found the deed. She thinks small. She thinks about houses. I think about narratives. The narrative right now is that you're a fraudster who stole from his wife," Thorne noted. "Change it," Alexander commanded. "Launch the countersuit." Thorne raised an eyebrow. "Countersuit on what grounds? She has the trust documents." "Not about the house," Alexander hissed. "About the foundation, the Sterling Foundation." Thorne paused. "Go on." "Victoria is the sole trustee of the foundation," Alexander said, a wicked smile spreading across his face. "She signs the checks. She approves the grants. For the last 3 years, $5 million has gone missing from that foundation. It went to offshore accounts in the Caymans." "Accounts you control," Thorne pointed out. "Accounts that are anonymous," Alexander corrected. "But the transfer authorizations, they have Victoria's digital signature, the IP address for the transfers, the home Wi-Fi. The laptop used her MacBook." Thorne whistled low. "You used her laptop." While she was sleeping, Alexander bragged, I installed a remote access Trojan. I did the transfers from my phone, but it looked like it came from her machine. If we tip off the FB, they won't look at me for the bank fraud. They'll look at her for charity embezzlement. And here's the kicker, I'll cut a deal. I'll testify against her. I'll say she forced me to take out the loans to cover her theft. You want to frame the victim, Thorne said, looking impressed. That's dark, Alex, even for me. It's survival, Alexander said. If she goes down, the trust assets are seized by the government to pay back the victims. The house gets auctioned. If I can't have it, nobody can. Plus, if I turn state's evidence, I get probation. She gets 10 years. And the mistress? Thorne asked. Brittany. She's a loose end, Alexander said dismissively. She has a hard drive. I told her to send it to the DA if I got arrested. It contains the proof of Victoria's guilt. Fake emails, the works. If Brittany does her job, Victoria will be in handcuffs by dinner time. Alexander leaned back, folding his arms. Make the call, Thorne. Leak it to the press first. Socialite charity scandal. Poison the jury pool before she even knows she's a suspect. 3 hours later, Victoria was sitting in her library with Hayden and Stella, the forensic accountant. They were combing through the hard drive Brittany had surrendered. It's sophisticated, Stella said, her face illuminated by the blue light of the monitor. He really did a number on you. Look at this emails to a banker in Zurich, sent from your account, asking how to hide assets. He spoofed the headers perfectly. He was planning this for years, Hayden murmured, looking sick. This isn't just greed. This is hatred. He wanted to destroy your reputation along with your finances. Suddenly, Victoria's phone began to buzz. Then Hayden's. Then the landline. Victoria picked up her mobile. It was a notification from a news app. Breaking news. Sterling charity scandal. Wife of disgraced mogul accused of embezzling millions from orphanage fund. Victoria tapped the link. Her face was plastered on the screen, a photo from a gala 3 years ago. The headline was brutal. Anonymous sources, Thorne claimed that Alexander Sterling's arrest was actually a cover for a larger investigation into Victoria Sterling's massive theft. He did it, Victoria whispered, dropping the phone. He flipped the narrative. Outside the mansion, a new sound emerged. Not the quiet crunch of a single car, but the roar of engines. Victoria walked to the window. News vans were lining up at the gate, and behind them, moving with the heavy authority of the government, were 3 black SUVs with federal plates. The FBI, Hayden said, standing up. They're here for the records, and probably for you. They think I did it, Victoria realized. He timed it. He knew Brittany would have the drive, but he didn't know I would intercept it. He launched the press attack to force the FBI's hand. We have the hard drive, Stella said. It proves he set you up. Does it? Hayden asked grimly. Or does it just look like a hard drive you possess full of incriminating evidence against yourself? If we hand this over now, it looks like we're trying to hide it. The doorbell rang. It was the heavy, insistent ring of law enforcement. Victoria looked at the hard drive. It was the only thing that could save her, but right now it looked like a smoking gun. Hide it, Victoria ordered Stella. What? If they find it, they won't believe us yet. They're here to raid. Stella, take the drive and go out the servants' entrance. Get it to an independent forensic cybersecurity firm. I need proof that those files were created by him, not me. I need metadata analysis. I need timestamps that prove I was elsewhere when those files were made. Victoria, you can't face them alone, Hayden said. I have to buy us time, Victoria said, smoothing her dress. She looked in the mirror. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a Blackwood. "Let them in, Hayden," she said. "And call the press agent. If Alexander wants a war in the media, we're going to give him one. But first, I have to survive the night without getting arrested." The front doors burst open. Agents in windbreakers with FBI in yellow letters poured into the foyer, guns drawn low. "Victoria Sterling," an agent shouted. "Step away from the desk. Keep your hands where we can see them." Victoria stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at them with imperious calm. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said, her voice echoing in the great hall. "I believe you have the wrong Sterling. But since you are here, perhaps you can help me find the $5 million my husband stole." The courtroom was packed. This wasn't just a divorce hearing anymore. It was the socialite trial of the decade. Alexander sat at the defense table looking smug. He had traded his orange jumpsuit for a sharp charcoal suit provided by Magnus Thorne. Across the aisle, Victoria sat with Hayden, her expression unreadable. The prosecution, led by a relentless AUSA named Robert Vance, had spent 2 days presenting the evidence. Alexander had planted the digital signatures, the offshore transfers, and the spoofed emails. To the jury, it looked like Victoria was a cold-hearted thief who had used her charity as a personal piggy bank. "The government calls Alexander Sterling to the stand," Vance announced. Alexander took the stand with the grace of a seasoned performer. He played the betrayed husband to perfection. "I wanted to believe in her." Alexander told the jury, his voice cracking artistically. "When I saw the irregularities, I tried to cover for her. I took out those loans on the house just to put the money back into the charity so the orphans wouldn't suffer. I broke the law, but I did it for love." A few jurors actually wiped away tears. Magnus Thorne smirked at Hayden. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. "Your witness," Vance said. Hayden stood up, but he didn't go to the lectern. He stayed at his seat. "The defense calls a rebuttal witness before we cross-examine Mr. Sterling. We call David Wu." Alexander's smirk vanished. David Wu was the lead forensic analyst at the cybersecurity firm where Stella had taken the hard drive. David Wu walked to the stand and opened a laptop which was mirrored onto the large screens in the courtroom. "Mr. Wu," Hayden began, "the government claims these emails were sent by Victoria Sterling from her MacBook at 11 p.m. on the night of October 14th. Is that correct?" "That is what the headers say, yes," Wu replied. "But headers can be forged. I looked deeper into the keystroke dynamics and the system kernel logs." "And what did you find?" "I found a shadow script." Wu explained, pointing to a string of green code on the screen. "It's a sophisticated piece of malware. It was programmed to execute these transfers and send these emails automatically. But more importantly, I found the source." Wu tapped a key. A map appeared. The script wasn't triggered by Victoria Sterling. It was triggered by a remote command sent from a mobile device. I traced the IMEI number of that device. "And who does that device belong to?" Hayden asked. "It's a secondary burner phone, registered to a shell company," Wu said. "But we tracked the GPS pings for that phone on the night of October 14th. The map zoomed in. It showed a pulsing red dot. While Victoria Sterling was at a public gala, where she was photographed by dozens of people, this phone was 3 miles away," Wu said. "It was at a high-end mistress's apartment, and the person using the phone was logged into the apartment's Wi-Fi under the name A. Sterling." A gasp rippled through the gallery. Alexander's face turned the color of ash. "But that's not all," Hayden said, his voice rising. "Mr. Wu, did you find anything else on the hard drive retrieved from the Ritz-Carlton?" "I found the drafts folder for the fake emails," Wu said. "And I found a video file. It seems the user of the computer accidentally triggered the webcam while they were setting up the malware. "Play it," Hayden commanded. The screen flickered. It was a grainy, low-light video. It showed the interior of the library at the mansion. Alexander Sterling was hunched over a laptop, Victoria's laptop. He was whispering to someone off-camera. "Almost done." Alexander's voice came through the speakers, clear and chilling. "Once these logs are set, she's toast. She'll be too busy fighting the FBI to notice I've emptied the trust. By the time she gets out of prison, Brittany and I will be in a country with no extradition. Now pass me that wine." The courtroom erupted. The judge hammered his gavel, but the damage was done. Alexander jumped up, screaming at Magnus Thorne, but the FBI agents at the back of the room were already moving forward. Victoria didn't look at him. She didn't need to. She watched as the man who tried to steal her life was tackled and handcuffed, this time for good. 2 weeks later, the mansion was quiet. The news vans were gone. The for sale sign that Alexander had illegally posted had been burned in the fireplace. Victoria stood in the grand foyer, holding a glass of champagne. Hayden stood beside her. "The trust is restored," Hayden said. "Alexander is looking at 25 years. Brittany took the 50,000 and moved to Seattle. She's cooperating with the feds to avoid charges. And the bank, they've issued a formal apology for the administrative error regarding the deed." "And the house?" Victoria asked. "It's yours, entirely, legally, forever." Victoria looked at the marble floors, the high ceilings, and the history etched into every corner. Then she looked at the front door, the door Alexander had used to bring his mistress into her home. "Hayden," she said, "call the contractors." "You want to renovate?" "No," Victoria said, a small smile playing on her lips. "I want to sell. I'm going to turn this place into a luxury boutique hotel. And the pool house. That's going to be a shelter for women who need a fresh start. I think my grandmother would like that much better than a Sterling living here." She turned and walked up the stairs, her heels clicking on the stone. She wasn't just a wife or a victim anymore. She was Victoria Blackwood. And the house, like her life, finally belonged to her. And that, my friends, is why you should never mistake a person's silence for weakness. Alexander Sterling thought he was the smartest man in the room, but he ended up in a room with 4 grey walls and a very long sentence. Victoria didn't just win back her house, she won back her name and her future. It just goes to show greed might get you the keys to the Porsche, but the truth will always keep the keys to the kingdom. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes revenge and justice, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more real-life dramas. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss an upload. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you found your name on the deed? Until next time, stay sharp.